Hey guys, welcome to this AP Shaco guide. If you don't know me, I'm Sefat and I'm currently Challenger 1113 LP on EOS. I want to make it clear that this guide is centered around tips and tricks on how to make use of your abilities. So I'm not going in depth with stuff like items, runes, full clearing, and decision making. I'll quickly show you guys the runes that I use and like a rough idea of what to build on AP Shaco. But with that out of the way, I just want to get into the tips and tricks. I'll be going through this spell by spell, so we'll start off with stuff to do with your Q, then W, then E, then R, and at the end I'll go over some of the things I didn't get a chance to talk about, such as how to do objectives, so don't worry, I'll include that too, and there will be timestamps in the description for everything. So let's get started with your Q. The most important thing to know about Shaco Q is that your W does not break the stealth. This means that we can Q in, and before attacking our enemy we can already have a box placed down. This works the best by hiding Shaco's W animation and putting a trap down outside of enemy vision, such as in a bush. From their point of view, this will look like you just queued in and started auto attacking without ever using your W, and that's an easy way to trick people into walking into it. Your Q has the same interaction with your ultimate, so if I use my Q and then use my R, it will not break the stealth. So what this can look like from enemy point of view is just a Shaco appearing right in front of them and they won't know it's a clone. A typical and good way to use this is to get yourself to low HP and then Q plus R right on top of the enemy, hoping that they'll just instinctively attack the low HP Shaco. This is relatively consistent and a reliable play that I use a lot. The last Q trick I want to go over is something people ask me about a lot. Why do I use my recall right after using my Q sometimes? This is a very min-maxing kind of thing that most of the times don't matter much, but I think it's worth including. Shaco's Q cooldown starts when the invisibility runs out. With a level 1 Q, the invisibility lasts 2.5 seconds. This means that if you use your Q and you just walk around waiting for it to end, that effectively adds 2.5 seconds to the cooldown. If what we do instead is we go up and we quickly use our Q and then we press recall right after, we basically shave off 2.5 seconds on the cooldown like this. Again, this isn't a big deal, but I thought I'd add it in anyway. Moving on to your W. Your W is probably your most important ability and you need to know how to use it well. So let me show you. When you put down your W, there's two things you want. You want the circle around the box to cover as much ground as possible, so not walls. And then you want the W to cut off a path if you can. Let me show you ground versus walls. So this box you can see here, the circle around it is only covering ground. That's good. The more ground is in the circle, the bigger area the box covers. This box over here instead, look at this. This has half the circle inside of a wall. This effectively means that half the box is now useless as it can't shoot in there and it can't trigger on anything in there. This is a bad trap. So one of the ways to avoid this is by never using your W on a wall like this. If I have my mouse inside of the wall like this and I press W, this trap will always be as close to the wall as possible. This is not what we want at all. What we want instead is we want to cover as much ground as possible. We want to put the trap as far away from the wall as we can, like this, but we need the circle to still hit the wall. Why? Because now no one can walk past here. You are now covering you're now covering the wall here, but you're also covering all this area. Compare this to a trap that stands here. This trap is covering the same area wall, but it isn't covering all of this as well. But it's still covering the wall itself. This is a very big difference. This trap over here to the left is very bad, and this one to the right here is really, really good. This is exactly how you want to use your traps, by having the corners of the circle just barely hit the wall, because this is how you get the most out of them, like this. The other thing I mentioned about the traps was to cut off paths. We kind of just covered that, and by making the circles touch the wall, we're kind of covering a big path here. When this circle touches the wall here, we're covering a path here, but this isn't exactly what I mean because this is a very open area. What I more generally mean is that you put your W in a place like this, where it will now block off an entire path. This is a very good trap and you can use these all throughout the game. The same goes for a place like this, a place over here like this. Like this. These are really, really good traps because they block an entire path. When you block off an entire path like that, people cannot go through there at all without triggering your trap. These are very good traps. Generally speaking, later on in the game, you also want to just put your traps down as much as possible. Just put them down a little randomly, that's alright, maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe you'll get an assist, maybe you'll just do some poke damage. It doesn't really matter too much, it's still value. Having a trap that's off cooldown like this, it's just value lost when you can just put it down on the ground instead and like stack up a new trap. One interesting thing to know about your traps is that the trigger range of the traps is the circle that you see here. So this means that something has to go inside of this circle to trigger it. But the actual fear range and the actual damage of the trap is bigger than this. So if I spawn a second target dummy in here that's going to activate it, you'll see that this target dummy up here is actually going to get feared and shot at as well. A really simple trick you can do with Shaco W is if you already have a trap placed down and you can make an enemy chase you and walk into it, then right before they walk into it, you put a trap down under where they're standing, because when the first trap triggers, it'll push them back into the new trap, and by the time the fear ends on the first trap, the second one will then be about to trigger, fearing them again between the two traps. And this is just one of the simplest plays you can do with AP Shaco. I want to note that Shaco W also gives quite a lot of vision. If we take a look at what I've done here, I've put down 4 traps in the enemy jungle. There are no wards here. And look how much vision we've gotten of the enemy jungle. So generally speaking, if you can move through enemy jungle and you just get some traps down, even if nobody ever walks into them, there's still great vision for your team. Moving on to your E. This is very short, but it's very important. We're going to talk about one of Shaco's strongest mechanics, his E passive. Shaco's basic attack slow enemies for 2 seconds while 2-shift poison, aka his E, is not on cooldown. This means that as long as we don't use our E, every auto attack is going to apply a slow. So when we're ganking in the early game, we don't want to use our E until the enemy is either out of reach or low enough to die from your E. Keep in mind your E does a lot of increased damage when the enemy is below 30% HP, so that's another reason to save them. What a lot of people don't know is that this effect also works on your clone. So if you don't use your E, every auto attack from the clone will also slow. It's a pretty cool thing to be aware of because you can use it to chase people down or stop them from chasing you down using the clone. Moving on to your R, let's start talking about the clone. So one thing we already briefly mentioned earlier is the play of getting yourself to low HP and then using Q plus R on top of an enemy, hoping that they instinctively just hit the clone and explodes right on top of them. This might be the most consistently strong play I pull off on AP Shaco. You can also just see a messy fight with lots of AoE abilities used and skill checks thrown around, and use your Q plus R in the middle of it and hope the clone will die to something and hit one or multiple enemies. This is also a valid play and I use this one quite frequently. One of my favorite plays is what I call the clone dive. It's where you gank a lane by using a Q behind the enemy, running to their tower, and then you just use your ultimate. Then you just make the clone take a few turret shots because you know the enemy is gonna run to the tower. And when they get there, the clone will be ready to explode from taking all those tower shots. This one takes a bit of practice because you need to learn to control yourself and the clone at the same time. But once you learn that, it's a relatively consistent play that'll either get you a kill or a flash almost every time. Another play with the clone is to use your R and then send the clone away. When the clone gets far enough away, we'll get to see a circle. If we go past this circle, the clone teleports to us. We can use this to our advantage and make the clone walk away like this. And then if we Q here, the enemy just gets to see this Shaco appear because we'll be invisible. So they might think this is the real Shaco and they might hit it. I use this trick a lot. So to take this trick a bit further, you can send the clone away and the clone will live for 18 seconds and then it'll explode no matter how much health it has. So we have a counter around here where we can see when it's about to expire. And if right before this explodes, we Q to this, we can basically make it instant explode on this, like this. This is a play I use kind of often, but not that often. It's a good play, but it's hard to pull off. So one thing that's important to know with Shaco R is that when you use it, the real Shaco, aka you, the player, will spawn towards the cursor and the clone will spawn the other direction. So if I hold my cursor over here and I press R, I'll spawn over here and the clone will spawn in the other direction. Many people seem to think it's random where you and the clone spawn, but that just isn't the case. It's towards the player's cursor. This is important to know because another thing with Shaco R is that it's a small teleport. If you hover over the R button, you'll get to see a circle. This is essentially the teleport range. Just like when you hover over your Q, you see this circle. When you hover over your R, you see this circle. This circle indicates how long the teleport is. When you know the distance that Shaco's R teleports you, there's actually a few walls that you can get over. You just have to keep in mind that you spawn towards the cursor. So if I put my cursor on the other side of this wall, we can see the circle here. I should go over. If I put my cursor right here and I press R, I'll go over the wall and the clone doesn't. Just keep in mind that you spawn towards the cursor, so when you use your ultimate, keep your mouse where you want your champion to spawn. The same way you do it when you use your Q. The last thing I want to go over with your ultimate is how to trick the enemies into believing it's the real Shaco. When you use your ultimate, you want to make the real Shaco, aka you, the player, attack the enemy right away and making the clone run away. So right after clicking R, you right click the enemy, making the real Shaco attack the enemy, and then you stop controlling yourself and focus on the clone. To make the clone look more believable, you need to start spamming R, or whichever button you use to control the clone, on the ground to make it move unpredictably like a player. By doing this, the real Shaco looks like a clone because it's just standing still and auto-attacking, while the clone will look more like a player because we're making it move unpredictably, making it seem like it's a player trying to sidestep. This is something that comes with practice. It's not easy to learn, it takes a lot of practice, but the more you try, the better you'll be. Another question I get all the time is how do you do dragons with Shaco? So I'll show you, because it can be a bit difficult, but once you figure it out, you can always do it flawlessly, no problem. So dragons and voidgrubs and in general epic monsters, they always attack the closest target to them, no matter who it is or what it is. So if we leash this dragon, if I just right click it like this, you see how far I'm standing away from it. When I now put my trap down, it's probably going to be too close to it. The better thing to do is to right click behind the dragon like this, and then when our character starts walking towards it, when we're standing inside the dragon, we right click the dragon. So we go like this, and now it's very difficult to get much closer to it than we already are. Now we put down our trap, and odds are it's going to be further away than we are, and then we can easily take this. Although, keep in mind, Infernal Dragon and Mountain Dragon both deal AoE attacks, so even if I go really close to it like this, and I put my trap down behind me, it'll still get shot. So we need to put it on the opposite side, because of the AoE damage. This is just a good habit to get into, to always put the trap on the other side of where you're standing, no matter what drake it is, just so you avoid this AoE damage hitting it. When doing voidgrubs, the same thing applies. We want to make sure we stand closer than the trap does. The easiest way that I've found to do the voidgrubs is to first go up and E this one, and then wait here for them all to group up, and then you walk up, and then you put, this is difficult because these body block you, then you put the trap behind you, and then this trap will now hit all three of them. This is what I've found to be the most efficient way. Alright, that's all I have for this video. This was the first time I've ever recorded a video rather than just taking my stream board, so this was a new experience for me. I hope it turned out well, and I hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments section. I also stream on Twitch 5 times a week. The link is in the description, and I'll also be posting the transcript I used for this video on my Discord server, which is also linked in the description. So if for some reason you'd like to read the tips and tricks instead, you can do that. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you either enjoyed the video or learned something. Good luck playing Shaco, fellas.